Hi booktube, Aaron here, hope you're doing okay. Today I've got a bit of a random reading update for you. It's a fairly sprawling one, so I'm going to try and be concise because I've read a fair bit so far in September and I haven't really talked about it that much on the channel, so I'll try and rectify that today, but I don't want to ramble on for too long, so we'll see how it goes. But I've finished 6 books so far this year, and I won't talk about all of them, and I'll probably only talk in detail about a couple of them. But it's been pretty fun so far. The first book I finished was If on a Winter's Night, a Traveller by Italo Calvino, and I think firstly the thing I enjoyed, and it seems like it's going to be the thing I'm going to keep enjoying when I come back to Calvino, is his writing style. There are some differences in tone to the Cosmocomics, which is before this all I'd read by Calvino. Yeah, there's a kind of a charm and a kind of sparkle and a sense of playfulness to his writing that I really love. And so I think I'm going to really enjoy that when I keep coming back to Calvino. And the sort of conceit of this story is that you, the reader, have just picked up Italo Calvino's new novel, If on a Winter's Night, a Traveller, at the bookshop, and then you've started reading it, and it's a great sort of detective story about a guy turning up at a train station. I was imagining the train station from Brief Encounter and the tea room from Brief Encounter, and he goes in and there are all the locals gossiping and all of that, and he's got this briefcase that he's got to deliver, and it's all got messed up, and you're getting really enveloped in the story and quite invested, and then suddenly you're back at the beginning of the story after about 15 pages, and you're confused. So you be think, oh well, I'm enjoying it. Maybe it'll be okay next time. So you keep on reading, and at the exact same point, again it repeats. And you don't have to worry, because this is only you in the story that this happens to. It isn't you actually reading this that this happens to. And so you go back to the bookshop and you explain what happens, and it turns out there's been a big mistake and the publisher have apologised, and you can get your money back, or you can trade in your faulty copy and get the actual correct copy of the book. But you've just been reading this book, and it turns out this book isn't even If on a Winter's Night, a Traveller by Italo Calvino. It's a book by, this detective story is a book by someone else entirely, and you want to finish that book, and so you ask which book it is, and so you get that, and when you're getting it, you meet this other reader, and you sort of team up and decide to keep in contact, so that if there's any trouble with this book, you can be a bit of a support team for each other, and it goes on from there. And essentially, there's that there'll be the reader being addressed in the second person, and then you get the snippets of the book that the reader is reading, and it just sort of keeps alternating from there. So it can be a bit sort of jolting and discombobulating at times, but it is really, really fun, and you do get really invested in these stories, and so you are just as annoyed as the reader in this book when they're broken off. And yeah, I think really Calvino has a lot to say about the joys and frustrations of reading, and how we relate to other readers, and how the world generally sees books and sees readers, and the not quite the futility of translation, but the problems, I suppose, of translation, and all these sort of kind of things are all thrown up in the air. It gets very discombobulating, and even though I only finished this just over a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago, I am having trouble sort of stringing it all together. But I did really enjoy it, and it'll be one I'll be coming back to. So yeah, I'm not too concerned. And I actually unwittingly ended up participating not only with this one in Shorty September, Shorty September, because this is, actually no, this is just over 250 pages. But I did end up participating in Sumerian in September, since actually one of the books that the reader reads in this is a sort of lost classic written in Sumerian, and it is Cimm, Sumerian, not Sumerian. So yeah, that was quite funny as well, but it had nothing at all to do with what's his face, Conan the Barbarian. Next up, I finished some poems by Hafez, which I really, really loved, and I want to get a hold of the book that these poems are taken from. So it's taken from Faces of Love, Hafez and the Poets of Shiraz, introduced and translated by Dick Davies. So that this is a slimmer selection of Hafez's poems from that book. And I really loved it. They were really vivid and sometimes really funny, and just very, very, very just personal poems as well at times. I'll try and read a few for Poetry Thursday at some point, but yeah, it's a poet I'd like to get to know a bit better. Because he's, I don't know, he seems to be mocking a lot of the people around him and sort of mocking the orthodoxy of his day and things like that. And it'll be interesting to get a better idea of what he actually really thought. I also finished Like by A. Stallings. This was a reread for me. I really like Stallings' poetry. I think she's yeah, just a great poet, and she has a really firm grasp on form. Her poems always feel really considered. There's very little in her poetry that comes across as kind of throwaway. And I was feeling the central theme of this collection a little stronger. So it is all about simile, and how that sort of functions in language, and how it comes up in other places like in social media. And there's a great poem in here called it's called Half of an Epic Simile Not Found in Hesiod, and I may as well read it out. But what I found, and I'll probably have to know Hesiod to be able to work out where she wants this simile to fit in, because we're not getting the roots, the thing being compared to. We're just getting this long epic simile with actually, it's kind of multiple similes all in one, and they're actually kind of similes of each other. So I'll read it all out, and maybe it'll make a little more sense that way. So this is Half of an Epic Simile Not Found in Hesiod. As the winter solstice, when a faded blonde on the brink of middle age goes to the salon to brighten up her outlook and her spirits, warm water on her scalp, the rich shampoo that breathes of almond blossoms, to submit to another's expert, disinterested caresses, while outside the plate glass window people push against the dwindling year and lean into the wind, their foreheads pinched with doubts and debts. And it's afternoon, but night comes chattering down like the shutters of a shop in a recession, and all she asks for is a colour adjustment, for rays of honey to eclipse the grey, and for the light to lengthen just a little. And I think that was when I finished that poem during this reread. That was when suddenly the whole, even though I already sort of understood that the whole collection is about similes, or at least many of the poems in here are about similes, that was sort of a bit of a eureka moment, and I don't know, just kind of felt, just because it seems quite simple to talk about similes, but suddenly I just realised just really how good these poems are, And even though that's not really my favourite poem in the collection, I think it frames a lot of the other poems really well, and maybe helps you realise her just the way she's going about these poems, the way she's speaking to the past and the present at once, and using one to make sense of the other. So yeah, a poet that I really want to read more of, but this is all I've got so far, so I might just keep rereading this book until it falls apart. So yeah, that was really, really good. Then I read Hamlet for Shakespeare. This isn't one of the plays that are being discussed this year, but I just had my heart set on reading Hamlet this year, so I read it anyway, and I'll make a separate video about my thoughts on Hamlet this time through. So it won't be it won't be like a summary or a review or anything like that. Instead, it'll just be the thoughts of a reader with a text that sort of many of us have probably at least read once before, or have seen or heard bits from, and it's me. I'll probably just try and see about what felt different this time through, if that makes any sense, and hopefully it'll make more sense when I actually make the video. Also tonight I'm going to try and watch Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet as well, and again see if anything seems different or stands out, so that might be part of the video as well. I also finished Sir Thomas Browne's major works. Quite a lot of this went over my head, but there is something really comforting about the way he writes. I really liked that the first work in here is called Religio Medici, which is the religion of a physician, and he's essentially he is, how did I phrase it? I was talking to someone about it. He's essentially putting his faith up against his reason, but also kind of putting his reason up against his faith as well, if that makes any sense. So he's just saying what he thinks and not really caring if it fits in perfectly with what he's kind of supposed to think in that time. And he very much feels like someone who he's on certain issues kind of sitting on the fence. Not that he can't decide between two different views, but really he has his own views, and he's not necessarily being attacked by everyone around him, but he's actually quite happy to take stabs at everyone around him instead. At least that's the impression I got in Religio Medici. So that was really, really interesting, more interesting than I was expecting. And actually right at the back there's another one that by its title sounds really boring. It's called Christian Morals, and it's essentially a Christian version of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. It's all in a very Christian framework, but again it's not always as orthodox as you'd expect. I suppose orthodox is the word of the day. I also loved, how do you say it, Hydriotaphia, also known as urn burial. That's definitely one of the sort of highlights from in here. Great meditation on, I suppose, on death ultimately, and I suppose how you can sort of tell what people think about death. Well, not necessarily. He's not really examining other people too much, but he's talking about different kinds of funeral rites, and then that leads him to sort of meditate on mortality, and it's really, really fascinating. And straight after that there's the Garden of Cyrus, which is really intriguing, but at least for me at the moment makes absolutely no sense. But yeah, ultimately I enjoyed it, but he's going to be one of those writers. I'll put him in a similar category to William Blake, where because I read the sort of complete poems of William Blake earlier this year, and I absolutely loved it. But by the end, I was realizing that essentially what I'll have to do next time is just every now and then pick a certain work and read that slowly and put him back and leave him alone for a while. And I'll have to do something similar with Thomas Browne. I think I'll just every now and then come back to one particular essay and read it very, very slowly, and then put him away and leave him alone for a few months before I pick him up again. And so yeah, it feels like I've kind of dipped my toe in, even though I've read the whole book, and it's kind of just the beginning of me getting to know this writer. And then the last book I want to talk about today is Duende by Tracy K. Smith. I don't really have too much to say about this. I didn't like this quite as much as the other Tracy K. Smith poetry collection I've read, which is Life on Mars. But I think when she's really engaging with the music and the art that she loves, so there's a poem in here called, if I can find it, when Zappa crashes my family reunion, which reads like a really weird kind of dream journal almost. But I really, really liked that, and I think in Life on Mars, when she was really engaging with like David Bowie and other sort of pop culture references that really mean a lot to her, I was really, really enjoying that. And there's also a poem in here called, let's see if I can find it. It's called Into the Moonless Night, which is about it's about the Lord's Resistance Army in Uganda, and these girls who were given as wives to the commanders, and it's kind of done like a it's sort of like a play. So you've got a chorus and then individual voices, and it really reminded me of T.S. Eliot's dramas, but with her own, like, it doesn't sound like T.S. Eliot, but she's kind of invoking that very, very high, austere, but very charged kind of address, really, I suppose, because it's supposed to be dramatic, and these characters, these voices are addressing you directly. So that was really, really good. The rest of the collection didn't make too much of an impression on me, but yeah, I didn't feel like I'd wasted my time at all. It was still enjoyable, and that's everything I've read so far. So a bit of a squished and crazy, haphazard reading update, I suppose. At the moment, I'm still reading Dante. I'm reading this with a sort of don't know what to call it, a kind of reading program kind of thing called 100 Days with Dante. But I only realised last week that you're not supposed to read a canto a day. They've sort of slowed down their schedules so that you're actually only reading 3 cantos a week, which is fine. So I've slowed down accordingly, and we'll just be reading 3 cantos a week, and that means there's more space for other reading around Dante, and it means I can take my time and yeah, just sort of consider it a bit more, I suppose. But I've been really enjoying it so far. I'm only up to I've just finished Canto 10, which was is that the one with the heretics and they're essentially in tombs, and they're being sort of burnt alive. Yeah, and it's not just heretics; it's also like Epicureans and people who deny the existence of the soul. So it's kind of appropriate that they're in tombs. So that was, yeah, it's been really, really good, and it's been really fascinating so far. I might also try and read or reread War of the Beasts and the Animals by Maria Stepanova. With it being September, with Shaptember, I'm also in the back of my head trying to think of other authors beginning with S that I can read, so I might reread this, and I've had A.E. Stallings and Tracy K. Smith and things like that. So I haven't started this yet, but I might read this. Just started reading Bordolino by Umberto Eco, so I'll probably be talking about that in my next update. Because I was reading Calvino and I wanted to read some more Calvino straight afterwards. I've got Invisible Cities, but it's just I've been watching lectures and things like that about Dante, and just the way in which certain things. So like with these people in the tombs, I was just talking about. There's this one guy who gets out, and it's someone. It's like the father of one of Dante's friends, and he's come up to ask if his son is still alive, basically. But as he's coming up out of the tomb, he's coming out of the tomb from the navel upwards, and apparently that's a kind of caricature of a mosaic in. I don't think it's in Ravenna. I'm trying to remember where it is, but it's in the basement of a church and it's not there anymore. But it's it's I think it's supposed to be the resurrection of Christ maybe, but and he's shown from the navel upwards, and so and just the way certain sort of signs are being read and reinterpreted, and the way that Dante is so visual and he's giving you these sort of cues which are sort of connecting you back to ancient mythology or to the Florence of his day or to sort of figures from the Bible and things like that. It was making me think of not Calvino, making me think of Umberto Eco. So I thought I'd crack open another Umberto Eco, so that's why I'm reading Bordolino. This is turning into a bit of a ramble, but I'll just finish by saying that I've started the House of Government by Yuri Slezkine, I want to say. Please correct me if I'm saying that wrong. I'm about 50 pages in, and really quite liking it. It's a bit there are a lot of individuals here that he's talking about, so it's a bit discombobulating in that sense, but kind of in the preface he's kind of assured you that you don't have to worry about that too much. People are gonna just come and go, and so I think as long as I'm keeping an idea of the big picture, then it should be all right. But at the moment it's still in the very early 1900s. I think he's given us an overview of the sort of rise of Bolshevism, and now we've got some people who are in exile in Siberia, and he's sort of giving us tastes of their daily lives and activities, and how they keep themselves from just being utterly depressed in Siberia in winter. So it's been really interesting so far, so we'll see where it goes from there. But for now, that's everything. A bit of a ramble, but that's where my reading's at the moment, and I'm sure I'll see you soon for something else. So for now, take care. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.